Nathan Hollis had never known a day without money in his life. Born into railroads and raised in a mansion that looked out over El Paso's ever-growing skyline, Nathan wore silk before he could walk and learned business before he learned mercy. His father, William Hollis, the man who tamed the Southwest with steel tracks and iron wheels, never spoke softly and never gave anyone something for nothing, including his son. At 24, Nathan looked the part of a gentleman, tall, sharp-jawed, clean-shaven, his boots polished even after riding through dust. But under the trim suit and polite words was a man deeply unsure of himself. He could talk contracts, quote numbers, make a room go quiet with one raised eyebrow. But he couldn't sleep through the night. Not since the fire. It had happened 2 years ago. A fire in the freight yards. One worker died. The rest barely escaped. And though no one ever blamed him outright, Nathan had been there. He'd given the order to reroute the line through the older storage building, ignoring the engineer's warnings. It had saved his father money and cost a man his life. Nathan never spoke of it, never confessed to anyone. But the man's name, Eli Beckett, stayed with him like soot under fingernails. Eli had a daughter. Probably still does. Nathan made sure her mother got a payout, hidden behind company language and legal trickery. He thought that would be enough to quiet the guilt. But it never left. It turned into something else. Quiet anger, shame, a dull ache that settled behind his ribs. That spring, William Hollis called him into his study. The old man sat behind a wide oak desk, the walls lined with maps of the railway system like they were veins of a great living thing. He barely looked up when Nathan walked in. "We're expanding toward Hill County," he said. "Need to smooth things over with the people out there. Farmers mostly. Stubborn. Poor. Suspicious of progress." Nathan sat without being asked. "Buy the land." William finally looked up. "We tried. They want more than it's worth. Think the railroad's going to make them rich overnight. They're wrong, of course, but there's a way to make it happen." Nathan's stomach sank. He already hated the tone in his father's voice. "You're going to marry into it." "What?" Nathan laughed, thinking a joke. It wasn't. "You're going to marry the farmer's daughter. Her name's Cora Jane Beckett. Her father." Nathan stopped breathing. "Beckett?" William nodded. "That's right. Elias Beckett. He owns the biggest piece of land we need. Doesn't trust lawyers or salesmen. Thinks family ties matter. You marry his daughter, he signs the land over, we build the line, and we all get rich. Simple." Nathan looked down at his hands. The name. The fire. The man he let die. It had been Elias, not Eli. Had he gotten it wrong all this time? He thought of the reports, the rushed decisions, the smoke. "I don't even know her." "You'll learn. You'll play the loving husband for a while. After the land's signed over, she'll have what she wants, your name, your money, her family's safety. You'll have what we need. After that, do what you want." Nathan felt sick, but he didn't say no. 2 weeks later, he rode out to Hill County, a suitcase strapped to his saddle and a wedding ring in his coat pocket. The Beckett farm was tired but proud. Fields of rye stretched under the spring sun, broken only by fences and patches of wildflowers. The house itself was small, its white paint peeling but clean. A woman stood on the porch, arms folded, eyes narrowed. Cora Jane Beckett wasn't what he expected. She was younger, maybe 20. Her dress was plain, her hands rough from work, but her eyes were sharp. Hazel and full of something Nathan couldn't name yet. Suspicion, maybe, or intelligence. She didn't smile when they met. Didn't curtsy. Just said, "So you're the railroad man, come to marry me." Nathan nodded. "I am." They married 2 days later, in a small church with peeling plaster and no music. Elias Beckett didn't come. "Too sick," Cora said. Or maybe too angry. She didn't say much else. Back at the farm, Nathan tried to play the part. He helped with chores, asked questions about her life, listened when she spoke, which wasn't often. She didn't trust him, and he didn't blame her. At night, they shared a bed, but not words. She'd turn her back. He'd stare at the ceiling. He couldn't bring himself to touch her. She didn't ask why. Maybe she was glad. Weeks passed. Elias finally came out to the porch one evening, leaning heavy on a cane, his lungs wheezing. His face was lined deep with age and grief. "You like my daughter?" he asked Nathan. Nathan didn't know how to answer. "I'll sign the land over," Elias said after a long silence. "But if you ever hurt her, I'll burn that railroad to the ground. You understand me, son?" Nathan nodded. He meant to mean it. They signed the papers 3 days later. Nathan sent the deed off to his father by mail. No ceremony, no celebration. But something was changing in him. Cora started humming when she worked. She sang when she thought no one could hear. Nathan found himself watching her from the window. How she moved, how she spoke softly to the animals, how she smiled to herself sometimes, just small little smiles that didn't need anyone else to see them. One night, he asked her about her mother. Cora looked at him like he'd broken something. "She died when I was 12. Fever. Pa raised me." "I'm sorry," Nathan said. And he meant it. She turned toward him. "What are you sorry for exactly?" He looked down. His hands were shaking. "Your father didn't send you here for love," she said. "You're not the first man who thought a poor girl would sell herself for a better life. But you're the first to seem like you hate yourself for it." Nathan didn't sleep that night. He started waking up earlier, fixing fence posts before she could, making breakfast, listening to her hum, wanting her to trust him. One morning, she touched his arm, just for a second, but stayed with him all day. Later that week, a letter came from El Paso. His father, short and cold. "Land secured. Return immediately. Your duty here is done." Nathan folded it and burned it in the stove. He wasn't ready. Something had shifted, and it wasn't just guilt anymore. It was the way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he couldn't see, like she was waiting for something, maybe an answer, maybe the truth. He had lied to her, used her, but now he wanted to earn it back. He didn't know how yet, but he wasn't leaving. Not until she knew the truth, and not until he knew what she'd do after hearing it. The morning after the letter burned to ash, Nathan walked out to the barn and found someone else already there, loading feed, back turned. The man straightened up when he heard footsteps and turned slowly. His eyes locked onto Nathan's with the cool calm of someone who already knew who he was dealing with. "This him?" the man asked. Cora appeared behind Nathan, wiping her hands on her skirt. "This is him." Nathan glanced between them. "Who is this?" "Jed Ransom," Cora said quietly. "He worked here before you came." Jed stepped forward. He had a wide frame and a knife on his belt that looked worn from use. There was dirt on his sleeves and dried blood on his knuckles, like he'd been in a fight recently and didn't care enough to clean up. His voice was flat. "I knew Cora since we were kids. Her pa used to say she'd marry me one day." Cora said nothing. Her eyes gave away nothing either. Nathan extended a hand. Jed didn't take it. After that, Jed was around constantly, helping Elias repair the water pump, fixing fence lines, hauling lumber with Nathan in a silence so thick it felt like rope around the neck. He said little, but his presence said plenty. He didn't trust Nathan, and it wasn't just jealousy. There was something deeper, something unreadable in Jed's sharp glances and the way he lingered near Cora without ever touching her. Nathan caught on slowly. Elias was sick but not dumb. He didn't trust the railroad any more than he trusted the bankers who kept sniffing around Hill County. And Jed? Jed wasn't just helping out of kindness. He was watching, waiting. He'd been promised something once, and Nathan's arrival had ruined it. Then there was Sarah Weaver, who ran the local store. She was a widow, early 30s, always watching people more than she spoke to them. Nathan went in one morning to buy nails and salt and ended up talking to her for half an hour. She asked simple questions. How was life on the Beckett farm? Was Cora well? Had Elias regained strength? It felt casual but too precise. Before Nathan left, Sarah said, "Elias isn't the kind of man to give up his land easy. If he gave it to you, it's because he thought he had no other choice." Nathan didn't know what to say. Sarah just nodded and said, "People think they can build over lives and call it progress. But land remembers. He walked back to the farm with those words sitting heavy in his chest. That night, Nathan lay in bed beside Cora. She faced the wall. He tried to speak, but stopped. She turned after a long pause and looked at him. "You're still lying?" she said. Not question, not cruel, just tired. "I was sent here for a reason," he admitted. "I know." Nathan sat up. "I want to tell you everything. But not yet. I need to understand it myself first." Cora didn't move. "My father's dying. You know that." Nathan nodded slowly. "Jed thinks the land should stay in the family. He's furious Pa gave it up. And Sarah? She's been watching him. Everyone here knows things before they happen." Nathan looked at her, the curve of her cheek in the low moonlight. "And what do you think?" She met his eyes. "I think I stopped being sure the day you arrived." The next morning, Jed wasn't at the barn. Elias was coughing so hard it shook the walls. Cora was in the kitchen trying to boil herbs. Nathan went out to the barn alone and found something odd. Footprints leading behind a shed where the telegraph line ran through a patch of trees. He followed them until he found a line cut, clean and deliberate. Someone didn't want messages getting in or out. He turned and found Jed standing there, arms crossed. "You cut the wire?" Nathan asked. Jed shrugged. "You weren't planning on leaving, were you?" Nathan felt a flash of heat in his chest. "You think this is going to fix anything?" "I think you're here under false pretenses," Jed said. "I think you conned Elias into giving up the last thing he owns. And I think when he dies, you're going to disappear and leave her with nothing but a name." Nathan stepped closer. "And you think cutting a wire makes you the hero?" Jed didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to make sure Cora doesn't get used again." There it was. Again, the assumption that Nathan was just another snake from the city, all charm and no spine. But Nathan didn't fight back. Not yet. He returned to the house. Cora was alone, Elias asleep in the back room. She was stirring a pot of stew, eyes distant. "I need to tell you something," Nathan said. She didn't turn. He told her about the fire, the mistake, the man who died, the lies after, the payout sent quietly to a grieving family, the silence that ate at him since. Cora stirred slowly. "You let someone die?" "I did." She turned to face him. Her expression wasn't angry. It was worse, blank. "And you married me because my father owns the land?" He nodded. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "Do you think I'm some naive little thing who didn't know this was a deal?" "No," he said, "but I think you hoped it might turn into something real." Her jaw tightened. "You think I didn't know about the letters? The lawyer who came through town 2 months ago asking about easements? My father told me. Said if I married you, maybe it'd keep our family afloat. Said I'd be safer with a man who understood the world better than he did." Nathan's heart thudded. "You're not the only one with secrets," she added. "You think I loved Jed? Maybe once. But he tried to make choices for me. Tried to tell me who I'd be if I stayed here. I don't want to be someone's promise. I want to make my own." The pot boiled over, and she didn't flinch. Nathan reached forward, carefully took the pot off the flame, and set it aside. She looked up at him. "You said you don't know who you are yet. Figure that out. But don't do it for me. Do it because you want to stop hiding." He nodded slowly, breath catching. Outside, the wind was rising. A storm was coming. And somewhere in that storm were choices, each more dangerous than the last. The first bolt of lightning struck just after midnight. It split the sky over Hill County, lighting up the dry earth like a flare over a battlefield. Nathan was out in the shed, checking the roof after a leak earlier that day, when he saw a figure moving down by the far edge of the property. He grabbed the lantern and headed out into the wind. By the time he got close, he recognized Jed's hunched figure kneeling near the rail marker. "What the hell are you doing?" Nathan called out, voice swallowed by the wind. Jed stood, face pale and eyes wide. "They're surveying already." Nathan stepped forward and saw the post, bright orange paint, freshly marked by the company, likely by men sent from El Paso. The railroad wasn't waiting. They had taken the deed and moved ahead, regardless of who still lived on the land or what had been promised. His father had never intended to wait for a green light from Nathan. The wedding had been a formality. The expansion was already in motion. They're going to tear this place down, Jed said. The tracks cut straight through the west fields. Barn goes, well goes, half the house, probably two. Nathan's stomach twisted. They weren't supposed to come yet. I didn't give them permission. You don't have to. You handed over the land. Jed's voice was like ice. You did this. Nathan shook his head, words failing him. He turned back toward the house, storm pounding in his ears. By the time he reached the porch, Cora was waiting. She'd seen the flashlights, the shapes moving near the fields, the railroad, men poking around like wolves in the dark. Her face was unreadable again, her eyes dry and unblinking. You knew, she said. I didn't. I swear. My father must have sent them. He stepped closer, soaked to the skin. I thought there'd be time. I thought we could find a way. You thought you could change the rules after the game started, she said, her voice soft. That's what men like your father do. They make deals and tell everyone else to clean up after. Nathan looked at her and saw the damage. More than just betrayal. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about the death of something rooted in the earth. Her family's land, her father's last will, the story of survival that had held the Becketts together for generations. It was all being erased under iron wheels and survey flags. Inside the house, Elias was coughing again, harder than before. Nathan stepped into the room and saw blood on the cloth in his hand. The old man looked up through glassy eyes. I thought you might be different, Elias rasped. But you're just like the rest. Nathan knelt beside him. I can fix this. You can't, Elias said. But maybe she can. Nathan didn't sleep that night. He stood on the porch, soaked and cold, watching the lanterns bobbing in the far fields as crews staked out the route for the tracks. Men worked through the night, paid by the mile. They didn't care what the land meant to anyone. They never did. At sunrise, he rode into town. The telegraph office was shuttered from the storm, but Sarah Weaver's store was open. She looked up from the counter, already knowing. They're here, she said. Nathan nodded. I need to talk to your brother. He's on the county board, isn't he? She hesitated. What good will that do? I need to know who signed off on this. My father doesn't have full rights to start development yet. He's skipping steps. If I can catch him violating state land use agreements. You want to beat your father at his own game? She asked. No. I want to stop this before it kills something worth saving. She looked at him for a long time, then said, go out back. He's there. Nathan spoke to her brother for an hour. He learned that William Hollis had already greased palms in Austin. Permits pushed through quietly, environmental waivers waived, county commissioners given bonuses for quick signatures. It wasn't legal, but it was buried so deep under paperwork no one would see it unless they were looking hard, unless someone made it public. As he left, Sarah caught him by the door. Even if you win this fight, she may never forgive you. I'm not doing it for that anymore. He rode hard back to the farm. The workers were gone by then, but the flags remained, bright orange stakes dotting the fields like grave markers. Cora was in the barn, brushing one of the horses with quick, angry strokes. He stepped inside, unsure if she'd even let him speak. I'm not going back to El Paso, he said. She didn't look at him. I don't care where you go. I'm staying here. To stop this. To undo what I can. I'm going to the press. To the land court. I'll challenge every permit, every contract. Why now? She turned, brushing straw from her skirt. Why now and not before? Because I was too much like him, Nathan said. I thought I could have both. The deal and the girl. But I can't. And I don't want his money if it means paving over people. She watched him quietly, the silence heavy. I know I don't deserve your trust, he added. But I want to earn it anyway. Cora stepped forward. She looked up at him, not soft, not warm, but steady. Then stay, and be ready to lose. They spent the next few days in a kind of war. Nathan contacted lawyers, contacted 2 newspapers in Austin. Sarah connected him to someone in the state environmental board willing to listen. But nothing moved fast. Meanwhile, the crew returned, more aggressive this time. One man shouted at Elias for walking near the survey line. Jed threatened to draw his knife. Then came the letter. It arrived in the post, marked with the Hollis Rail seal. Nathan opened it on the porch, hands trembling. Inside was a single-page decree. Nathan was stripped of any authority in the Hollis Railroad Company. His accounts frozen. His board seat revoked. It was signed by William Hollis. The message was clear. You're either on his side or in his way. Nathan sat down slowly, the letter limp in his hand. He was cut off. Cora read it over his shoulder and said nothing. She simply turned, walked inside, and returned with a small wooden box. Inside were documents, old land claims, hand-drawn maps, even a photograph of Elias's grandfather standing beside the first boundary marker in 1871. My father kept everything, she said, in case we ever needed to prove the land wasn't his to sell. Nathan stared at the papers. The original grant didn't name Elias as sole owner. It named a cooperative trust of 5 families, with descendants still scattered across the county. That meant the deed he signed had been invalid. The railroad had no right to build. Cora leaned close. My family's never trusted easy, but when we do, we keep our word. Can you do the same? He met her eyes. Yes. The next few days were a blur of affidavits, signatures, and late-night travel to Austin. Nathan filed an injunction, brought copies of the trust documents, named the railroad and William Hollis personally in the suit. The legal battle would take months, maybe years, but it would delay construction. And that was all they needed now to stop the bleeding. Then came the final blow. 2 nights later, Elias passed quietly in his sleep. They buried him behind the barn, under the cottonwood he planted for his wife. The sky was gray and still. Jed said the prayer. Sarah brought flowers. Cora didn't cry. She just held the old man's hat at her lap and stared at the earth as if she could will it to open and swallow her pain. That night, Nathan sat on the porch alone. Cora came out after a while and sat beside him. For a long time, they didn't speak. Then she said, "He believed in you. I don't know why. Because you stopped pretending you had nothing to lose." He turned to her. "I'll keep fighting, even if I lose the case. Even if we have to tear up the tracks ourselves." "You will," she said. "But not alone." The wind picked up again, softer this time. And for the first time in weeks, Nathan felt like he was breathing air that didn't choke him. In the distance, beyond the trees, the railroad flags still marked the future. But between them stood a house, a woman, and a man finally willing to risk everything to do what was right. The injunction held for 5 days. On the 6th, men from the railroad returned, not in work clothes this time, but armed with documents and flanked by county deputies. They claimed they had new approvals from the Austin courts, fast-tracked through an emergency hearing called by Nathan's father. The deputies weren't local. They didn't care that the land was under dispute. They posted notices on the barn and front door, declaring the property condemned for immediate commercial utility. Then they gave them until the end of the week to vacate. Cora ripped the paper from the door and didn't say a word. Nathan stared at the seal on the bottom. His father's initials beneath, judge's rushed signature. A signature bought and paid for. Inside, Jed was pacing. "This is it. We waited too long. We played their game, and they moved the board." Nathan didn't argue. He felt hollow, used up. The case hadn't failed. It had been stolen. Sarah arrived that evening with a flask and a folded newspaper. "It's all over the business section," she said. "Hollis Rail celebrates acquisition of key route. Hill County corridor named critical artery for western expansion." You made the front page. Nathan scanned the article. His name wasn't even mentioned. That night, the argument exploded. It started with Jed, his voice loud in the barn, accusing Nathan of letting the ink dry on a land theft. Cora tried to step between them, but Nathan lashed out too. "You think you'd have done better? You'd have scared them off with a pitchfork? The man's got senators in his pocket." Jed's fist clenched. "You brought them here. You married her to take what you wanted. Don't act like you're the victim now." Nathan moved fast, shoved Jed back into the stall wall. Jed grabbed him by the collar, but Cora screamed, and they both froze. She stood in the lamplight, pale and shaking. "Both of you get out of my father's barn." Jed backed away first, brushing dust from his shirt. He walked past her without looking. Nathan stayed. "Cora, you're just like them," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse. Flat. "Done. You make promises you can't keep and tell yourself that means you're better." He stepped closer. "I never wanted this to happen." "But you let it," she whispered. "You opened the door." She left him there, the doors swinging behind her. Nathan stayed in the barn most of that night, sitting in the dark with the smell of straw and old wood pressing in on him. At some point, a figure appeared at the threshold. Sarah. "You're losing her," she said quietly. "I already did." Sarah stepped inside and sat on the edge of a feed crate. "You're not the first man to think you could walk away from a legacy like your father's. But you can't just say you're different. You have to prove it, even if it breaks you." "I tried. I thought if I pushed hard enough, the truth would matter." She shook her head. "Truth doesn't matter when people profit from lies." Nathan looked down. "Then what do I do?" "You burn it all down." Her voice was calm, and something in her eyes, something resolute, made him believe she meant it. The next morning, Nathan went into town. Not to the courthouse, not to the paper. He went to the freight yard, where the surveyor's office had been set up. It was empty except for one man, his father's personal assistant, Jameson. Nathan had known him since childhood. Jameson looked up with a smirk. "Expected you sooner." "You bribed a judge," Nathan said. Jameson shrugged. "You signed the paperwork. That's what matters." Nathan walked slowly to the desk and placed a stack of papers down, documents from the original land trust. "This land isn't my father's to take. It never was." Jameson barely looked. "Too late. I'll go to federal court." "It'll take years," Jameson said. "By then the tracks will be down, the land paved, and no one will care." Nathan leaned in close. "Then I'll start somewhere else. Every document, every payoff. I'll find it and bring it to light." Jameson paused. "You sound like your mother." Nathan froze. Jameson gave a short, cold laugh. "Didn't know, did you? She tried this too. Years ago, when your father first laid track through Comanche burial land north of San Angelo. She fought it. She lost." Nathan stared, stunned. "That's why she left." "She didn't leave," Jameson said. "She was paid to go quiet." The truth cracked something open inside Nathan. A memory. His mother standing by the window in their old house, hands trembling, saying nothing when he asked why she was crying. He left without a word. He went straight to Sarah and told her everything. She listened, and when he finished, she said, "Then we burn them all." That night, Nathan, Sarah, and Jed met in the loft of the old church on the edge of town. Sarah had documents, correspondence, dates, signatures. Jed had connections, people in local labor unions who'd been watching the railroad swallow up land from black and Mexican ranchers too. And Nathan had motive. He had a name that opened doors. And now, finally, a reason to shut some of them forever. They made copies, sent files to papers across the state, even one to a federal oversight office. Then they waited. 2 days later, retaliation came swift and brutal. Someone set fire to Elias Beckett's barn. Nathan woke to the smell of smoke and ran outside, barefoot, shouting. The flames were already roaring. Jed and a few neighbors showed up to help, but it was too late. By dawn, the barn was ash, and beside the ruin was a new letter, pinned to a fence post, bearing only 4 words. "This is your fault." Cora found it first. She stood there in her nightdress, barefoot, hair wild in the wind. When she turned to Nathan, her face was unreadable. "I told you not to bring your fire here," she said. "I didn't like this. But you brought the men who did." He didn't argue. He couldn't, because deep down, she was right. Jed walked over, soaked in sweat and ash. "They'll burn the house next. You want to stop this? You're going to have to stop pretending there's any line left." Nathan nodded. That afternoon, He went into town and found Jameson again. This time, he came with more than threats. He brought a gun. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. I have witnesses, documents, and motive, Nathan said. I burned this company to the ground. Or you hand over the deed and get out. Jameson didn't blink. You won't shoot me. No, Nathan said. But I'll take this all the way to the governor if I have to. Jameson gave a thin smile. You won't live long enough to get there. I'll take my chances. There was a long silence. Then Jameson reached into a drawer and pulled out a deed transfer. Sign it, Nathan said. Jameson hesitated. Your father will come after you. He's already lost me. That night, Nathan brought the papers to Cora. She was sitting on the porch, staring at the stars that couldn't be seen through the smoke. He handed her the deed. It's yours. Officially. She didn't take it. What did you trade for it? My name. My future. Maybe more. She looked at him, still so quiet. And now what? You stay here? Play husband on a ghost farm? I'll rebuild what I can. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to fix something before it's all gone. Cora finally reached out and took the deed. She stared at it for a long time. Then she said, the land's still scorched. He nodded. But it's yours again. And for the first time in weeks, she looked at him with something like truth in her eyes. Not love. Not yet, but something cleaner. Honesty. A line not crossed, but maybe mended. Even if barely. Even if it might break again. Behind them, the ash still blew across the fields. But the storm for now had passed. The final blow didn't come with fire, or threats, or court papers. It came through a name in the newspaper. Nathan Hollis. A full article in the Houston Register, front page of the business section, just as Sarah warned. The story told it all. How the youngest son of railroad Baron Nathaniel Hollis had heroically restructured a struggling stretch of land in Hill County, facilitating historic cooperation between his father's company and local farmers. The spin was masterful. They painted him as the bridge that made progress possible. Cora stared at the paper in silence. Her name wasn't mentioned. Neither was Elias, or Jed, or the injunction, or the fire. It made it sound like Nathan had saved the farm. The headline made him look like a legacy reborn. Nathan read the same article at the general store, hands shaking so hard he dropped the paper. Sarah had sent the story to every major journalist she could reach, but his father beat them to the punch. He walked straight to her house. I told you this would happen, Sarah said before he even spoke. You told me to burn it down. I meant the truth, not your soul. He sank into her kitchen chair, eyes dark. He's not going to stop. I take one piece from him, and he spins 10 more lies. I made things worse. You made things visible, Sarah said. The people who matter saw it. That's the beginning. But it's not enough. Sarah crossed her arms. Then you need to stop thinking like a Hollis. He looked up. What do you mean? I mean, quit trying to win. That's what he does. You want to end this? You don't win, you lose. Loudly, publicly, with every dirty secret in plain sight. You let the world see how far your family will go to silence you. Nathan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, that would destroy me. Sarah gave a sad smile. That's the cost. And if you can't pay it, walk away now. He left her house and went straight to the Beckett farm. The air still smelled of char and damp soil. Jed was hauling what was left of the barn timber into a pile. He didn't stop when Nathan arrived. I saw the paper, Jed muttered. Congrats on being our savior. Nathan stood in the dirt, wordless. You come to offer more help? Jed said, voice bitter. Or are you just here to watch what's left burn down? Nathan took a breath. I'm going to do something. Something public. And probably permanent. Jed threw down a beam. You going to tell me what? I'm going to sign a confession. Full disclosure. About everything. My father's deals, the judge, the bribes. Me. How I lied to Cora when I first came here. How I came to convince her to sign. Jed turned and finally looked at him. That'll ruin you. Nathan nodded. It should. Jed said nothing, just looked at him for a long while. Then he turned back to the pile. Took you long enough. That night, Nathan wrote it all. 5 pages. Names, dates, every dirty deal he knew of. He didn't hold back. Not about himself, not about what his father had done, and not about the people who helped. He titled it, How the Railroad Was Built on Ashes. He gave a copy to Sarah, another to a newspaper in Fort Worth, and he took one copy with him to a press conference at the county seat. He walked into the hall, hair messy, boots stained with soot. Cameras clicked. He spoke for 7 minutes. Read the whole thing. No dramatic ending. No appeal for justice. Just the truth. It exploded. Within 2 days, the story made national headlines. The Hollis name was dragged into hearings. State investigators opened cases against multiple county officials. Jameson fled to Mexico. Hollis rail shares dropped. And Nathan? He lost everything. His bank account was frozen. His name was pulled from the Bar Association. His father publicly disowned him. His law degree was challenged. He had reporters at his door and protesters outside the old farmhouse he'd been sleeping in. Cora didn't speak to him, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know what to say. She read his confession 3 times. At first, she thought it was another trick. Then she realized what it really was. A man setting fire to the last thing he had to protect the thing he'd nearly destroyed. But it was Sarah who found him again. He was sitting behind the burned barn, watching dusk fall over the land he no longer owned. The legal fallout was still raging. Everything was uncertain. The railroad halted all construction in Hill County. But the fight had left him tired, ragged. Sarah sat beside him. "You ready for what comes next?" "I think so." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I sent a letter to your mother." Nathan looked over. "You found her?" Sarah nodded. "She lives in San Juan Capistrano. She read your statement. She wants to see you." Nathan couldn't speak. His hands trembled. "I'll drive you," Sarah said. 2 days later, they arrived at a modest cottage on a hill outside town. An old white dog barked at the fence. A woman stepped out. She had streaks of silver in her hair, and when she saw Nathan, her hands flew to her mouth. He hadn't seen her in 16 years. She opened the gate without a word and pulled him into her arms. Inside, over tea, she told him to rest. How she tried to stop the expansion through tribal land. How she'd been offered money to disappear. How she took it to keep Nathan safe. "I thought if I stayed, they'd bury me. And I couldn't risk you. I thought you abandoned me," he said softly. "I thought it was the only way to save you from becoming him." He looked down at his hands. "Maybe it worked, but I still became a part of it." "But you stepped out," she said. And that's what he never could do. On the drive back, Nathan asked Sarah to stop before they reached the farm. He walked the last mile alone. Cora was in the field, moving debris into a cart. She saw him coming and didn't stop. "I read the article," she said without turning. "The real one." He nodded. "I didn't come to ask for anything. Just wanted you to know it's done. It's all burned down." She kept stacking for a moment. Then she stopped. "Did it help?" "I don't know," he said, "but it hurt the right people." She turned then. Her eyes were tired, but something in her posture had softened. "I should have seen it sooner," she said. "That you were trying." "I wasn't. Not at first. But you are now." He nodded. She looked down. "I still don't know if I can trust you." "I don't either," he said. "But I'll stay here. Fix the fences. Help rebuild the barn. You don't owe me a word. Just let me work." She said nothing. Then slowly, she stepped aside and handed him a shovel. He took it. As he started digging, the sun broke through a line of clouds. The field still carried the weight of everything they'd lost. But for the first time in a long while, the land didn't feel like it was dying. And for Nathan Hollis, that was enough. The soil had turned thick with summer. Rain had returned, and with it the green. Where the barn once stood, a new frame now rose, half complete, patched together from salvaged wood and donated beams. Nathan worked without pay. He arrived before sunrise, left after dark, hands raw, back aching, silent through most of it. No one called him Hollis anymore. Just Nathan, or nothing at all. Redemption didn't come all at once. It came through sweat, through calloused palms and empty evenings, through facing the eyes of every man he'd once lied to, through quiet nods that eventually turned into short greetings. It was a slow forgiveness, the kind that doesn't use words. Cora never gave him more than a few sentences at a time, and rarely about the past. But she let him keep coming back. She let him mend fences, replant wheat. That was more than he deserved. He knew it. Jed warmed first. One afternoon, he handed Nathan a coffee without speaking, then walked off. The next week, he stayed long enough to offer help with the roof. Then, finally, "You hammer like a lawyer. Let me show you how a man does it." Sarah, on the other hand, disappeared for a while. She left town with a battered suitcase and a notebook full of interviews. A few months later, the Independent Tribune ran a 3-part feature, "The Land They Tried to Erase." Her name was on the byline. She'd gotten the story out, the one no one else would print. Not just about Hollis Rail, but about every family like the Becketts. Every trick the courts played. Every shadow deal. She came back changed. Quieter. Sharper. She didn't tell Nathan where she'd gone. She didn't have to. Elias Beckett, once thought dead, had returned to town as well. After the story broke wide and the political firestorm took down Judge Mallory and the sheriff, the charges against him were quietly dropped. He'd been hiding in the hills, watching everything unfold. When he finally walked back into the farmhouse, Cora didn't cry. She just opened the door, stepped aside, and let him in. He and Nathan shook hands weeks later. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't bitter either. There was understanding in that silence. Nathaniel Hollis, however, was not so lucky. With the state investigations came charges. Fraud, land theft, conspiracy. The empire began to crack. His lawyers dragged things out, bought time, filed appeals. But the public had turned. Shareholders pulled out. Federal agents froze assets. The legacy that had stood for 3 decades began to fall apart in less than a year. And through it all, Nathan never spoke to his father again. He heard, eventually, that the old man had retreated to a seaside estate in Maine, a place surrounded by silence and pine trees and no one to lie to. He also heard the name Hollis stopped appearing in the local Texas papers. By then, no one cared what happened to him. On the last day of harvest, 6 months after the fire, the town gathered on the Beckett land. The barn stood finished. The fields were full. There was still a long road ahead, but they'd survived the storm. Nathan stood at the edge of the crowd, not expecting to be asked to join. But when Cora raised a glass, she didn't raise it alone. She looked at him, nodded once, and said, "To rebuilding." People echoed it, softly, then louder. Nathan didn't drink. He just smiled a little and walked back to the fence line to keep working. That night, under a quiet sky, Cora walked out to where he sat on the back steps of the farmhouse. He didn't turn when she sat beside him. "You're not leaving?" she said. "No. You could. You've done enough." He shook his head. "That's not what this is." She looked up at the stars. "Do you regret it? Giving up your name?" He was quiet. "Then, every day. But I don't miss who I was when I had it." They sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "You know what I regret?" He looked over. "I regret thinking I had to do it all alone. That I had to be hard just to survive." "You're not hard," he said. "No," she agreed. "But I was scared, and I thought that meant I had to become something colder than I am." She stood up, dusted off her skirt, and started toward the door. Then she paused. "You want to stay?" she asked. "Not for work. Just stay." He didn't answer with words. He just rose and followed her in. The house still smelled like smoke in the back room. Some scars don't go away. But it was quiet. It was home. And outside, in the dark, a train passed on the horizon, distant and slow. It didn't stop. It didn't scream. It just moved on and kept going. That was the irony, maybe. The Great Hollis Line still ran through Texas. But the only man left from that empire was digging fence posts in a wheat field, quietly learning how to be something better. That, in the end, was his justice. Not revenge, not power, just peace. Earned, not given.